Welfare to order. I'm Paul Koretz, the chair, and my colleagues are here as well. So we have a full complement of members. I'm going to ask that we approve item 4 through item 8 on consent. If there are no objections, hearing none, those are approved. As the following, item 4, we approve the mayor's recommendations. Item 5 through 7, we approve the CAO's recommendations. And item 8, we approve the motion. And now we have general public comment. We have, to start, Dan with multiple items and a general public comment as well. So you'll have 2 minutes on multiple items and 1 minute general public comment. Whatever you'd like.
Okay, I appreciate that. Council members, 3 weeks ago you raided Bark and Bitches, the first storefront animal rescue in Los Angeles. In 3 weeks, no charges have been filed against the store or the founder. Those animals are now sitting in your kennels at the kennels that you are investigating for filthy conditions. Those animals could go to homes tonight, including mine. I've offered to take 1 large and 2 small animals at my own expense. They shouldn't be in your dirty kennels. They should be in our clean homes. The kennel spaces that they're occupying can be used to save other animals who will be killed this week for space. There is no reason to keep them in custody while the city attorney takes his time now 4 weeks in, or 3 weeks in. Regarding LA Animal Services, I'm about to file a lawsuit against Animal Services. I was prevented during general public comment for talking about animals being used in the commission of a crime in the city of Los Angeles by Commissioner Roger Wolfson. It is in the public record, in the court records. It's been published in mine. Your deputy city attorney ruled that off topic. Then your deputy city attorney, who I later identified as Tanya Isagiri, refused to identify herself while issuing rulings in this room about public matters. Judy Thompson, a deputy city attorney, said that your other deputy city attorney doesn't need to identify herself at a public hearing because some members of the public didn't identify themselves. That's not only untrue. The rule is that we only have to call ourselves something: banana, word, ball. And that's going to result in a claim against the city, a cease and desist, and a lawsuit for First Amendment violations.
And I assume this is your general public.
Yeah, I'll go on to the items. Thank you. The cell phone tax. If the city denies that it did nothing wrong, you shouldn't accept the $117,000. The city says it did nothing wrong. But if you do, put it into the Animal Welfare Trust Fund, because that's money that's being raided by Animal Services anyway. Regarding item number 10, ASPCA, I provide 300 free spay-neuters a year. This is inefficient. Without a mandatory spay-neuter law that is enforced, this is almost a pointless endeavor. I appreciate it. It's a good thing. It's not as good as it needs to be. It's not as good as it can be, number 10. If you don't enforce spay-neuter, what's the point in it all? And number 11, finally, it's inefficient. If you're going to regulate the use and exhibition of exotic animals, well, then why are you running the LA Zoo? The LA Zoo is an entertainment venue. You listed as an entertainment venue. Why can the city of Los Angeles exploit exotic animals for an entertainment venue? Why not close the zoo, send the animals to sanctuary, and use the land for homeless housing? I know you want to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, under item number 11, Alyssa Ganizer, maybe pronouncing that wrong, to be followed by Diana Mendoza and Leslie McCabe.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Ganeser, and I'm here representing the Southwestern Herpetologist Society. We strongly advocate for the protection of animals and wildlife conservation, and we oppose item number 11 as written. Since 1954, our organization has been educating the public with animal presentations to teach about reptiles in the ecosystem and the realities of pet ownership. But with broad and vague terms that can be interpreted such as wild and dangerous and high permit fees, these educational programs will have to be halted. A lot of people think the only good snake is a dead snake, but in our outreach programs, I personally have witnessed people change their minds through the power of a single physical touch.
Thank you. Diana Mendoza?
Good afternoon. I'm Diana Mendoza from PETA. We strongly support banning wild animals in entertainment, such as at parties and private events. And while we are glad to see the addition of a ban on public contact in this version of the ordinance, the new draft still falls short in many of the in many of the ways we've previously discussed. Dangerous animals should not be used in off-site exhibits of any kind, and at the very least, we ask that the city revise the ordinance in respect to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie McCabe?
Hi. Good afternoon. Leslie McCabe for Animal Defenders International, based here in LA. Regarding item 16-1357, with thanks to the committee and sponsors. Our detailed response was submitted to the record prior to the posting of the new language online late last night. Based on a cursory review of this new information, ADI supports the provisions to ban such acts as parties and those to ban public contact with certain dangerous animals, though we'd urge that all non-human primates be clearly included in this otherwise open-ended definition. We'd also urge that off-site presentations or performances of dangerous animals be prohibited, consistent with the motion this committee and the full council unanimously adopted 3 years ago. However, the city has yet to finalise and adopt the commitments described in 2017. The permit scheme still allows dangerous species to be paraded about on leashes. Put simply, a ban is not a ban where it permits or exempts the very acts it purports to restrict. Thanks.
Thank you. David? Oh, yes.
I really just wanted a little clarification. I know the goal of the ordinance was to prevent exotic animals from going to loud house parties. However, I'm not clear if exotic animals, small ones, are allowed at private residences for fundraisers, scout groups, or homeschools.
This is the time for us to hear from you.
Okay. Well, if that is the case, if those types of activities at a private residence are banned, then I oppose the ordinance as it's written. I'm with Wildlife Learning Center, and we place a high value on the presentations and the education that we provide because it teaches about conservation, the life sciences, and increases people's empathy for animals.
Thank you. Bob?
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Dunn, Bob Dunn's Animal Services. I've been in business in California here in Los Angeles area 45 years with exotic animals providing for the motion picture industry. The way this is written, I think it needs to be changed on two merits, and one is a production company to have to have a 10-day notice will not work. A lot of productions come to me and they need an animal the next day or in 2 days. Therefore, I think the 10-day rule has to be changed for productions because it's just not going to work for them. The second thing I like to have written in here changes on the definition of who can have exotic animals as research facility, wildlife conservation, nonprofit institution, and educational. Doesn't say anything about me, but yet in B7 it does say that I can get an animal to production if I have the right permits, which I do. But on top, it doesn't say anything about my situation, like I'm not educational, I'm not a research, and I'm not conservational. So where do I fall in this? Yet it says in B7 I can, so it's kind of mixed up. It's got to be clarified.
Okay, we'll ask those questions. Thank you.
Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd just like for the record to thank the department, the city attorney, and Council District 4 for sitting down with the advocates on both sides of this issue to try and reach a compromise on outstanding issues. And while not everyone is happy with the outcome, I think 90% of the changes requested and compromises are reflected in the latest version. I'd like to invite up Councilmember Rue and Valerie Flores from the City Attorney's Office to further explain the changes in the newest version of this ordinance, and also perhaps to address the concerns relating to educational services and to the film industry.
Mr. Chair, can I go ahead and read the...
I signed up out front to speak and you guys didn't call me.
What's your name?
Wes
Paul.
Paula.
You wanted to speak first?
Yeah, I think you may have signed up for the wrong item, but if you intended to speak to this, you can come up. And I think since all the testimonies relating to item 11, we never actually called item 11, so let's do that. Please.
Okay, this matters continue from October 2nd, 2019. City Attorney reports and ordinances relative to amending the Los Angeles Municipal Code to regulate the exhibition of a wild, exotic, or dangerous animal in the city, and amending LAMC Section 53.50 to update animal permit regulations. Additionally, subsequent to the release of the agenda, we received an additional ordinance and cover letter from the City Attorney dated November 4th, 2020.
Thank you.
I am Wes Pollock. I've been a board member or president, vice president of the Southwestern Herpetologist Society for the last 11 years, been a member for the last 30. And as my friend Alyssa said, for the last 70, we've been educating people, showing them what they could see in their yards and when they go out for hikes or ever. If this goes through, it's going to make that really difficult for us. We don't always have a 10-day lead time, weather, somebody canceling. We might get a call from the Natural History Museum, says, hey, we need you this weekend on a Wednesday. We can't get the permit, and we also don't charge anything. If somebody offers us an honorarium, a lot of times we don't accept it. Occasionally we will, especially if it's a long drive, but a lot of times we just say, no, thank you, we'll show up and do our thing. And it's not like we have a set of animals that we use. We've got 50 members that each have one or two different animals, and a few of them will show up. They would have to get the same permit from what I'm understanding of reading this, and that won't work for them. Plus, the wording in there, it's so vague that a lizard that could bite could be deemed dangerous if it's this big. It's crazy the way that works, and it needs to be clarified and defined much more clearly so that we all know what we're talking about.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Rue, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz, and I thank you for the opportunities for me to speak before this committee. And I first want to thank you, Mr. Koretz, for your support and continued leadership on animal welfare issues. And I also want to thank the many community members and all the great advocates who submitted their support letters. And I particularly want to give out a shout out to our very own Dove Lessel, who is a tremendous attorney and a faithful animal advocate and a friend to my office. Dove spent a huge amount of time working on this ordinance, and we're very saddened that he'll be leaving the city family. This issue of wild, exotic animals being abused came to my doorstep 4 years ago, when a baby giraffe and an elephant were being marched up the Hollywood Hills for a house party, so that partygoers could poke and prod at them for a cheap thrill. We've seen this over and over again in Council District 4, where gargantuan house parties have used exotic animals as props. The The animals are placed under significant physical and emotional duress in these situations, and humans are also put at risk when wild animals are improperly kept in private homes. Treating animals in this manner is unsafe, it is unethical, and perpetuates a barbaric view that wild and exotic animals are toys. This is beyond unacceptable, and we must end it. It's time for the Los Angeles City to take action and to make clear that treating such animals in this way is not in line with our city's values. This ordinance is the strongest product of multiple meetings with many stakeholders and is one of the strongest municipal ordinances in the nation regulating the exhibition of exotic animals, and acknowledges the good work being done by a number of conservation and education organizations. This is an important step forward for Los Angeles, and one that I hope that we will see carried across the United States. Thank you for your time, and I urge this committee to approve this ordinance, but before we move it on to the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Senior Assistant City Attorney Valerie Flores. As you know, City Attorney Dov Lascelles worked on this ordinance after the City Council requested it back in 2017. The specific direction was to prohibit the exhibition of wild or exotic animals for entertainment or amusement, or for other wild or exotic animal shows, and for rentals for house parties. The council did specifically ask that an exemption be included for legitimate conservation-related programs or presentations. After the City Attorney's Office transmitted the ordinance at the request of this committee, Mr. Lascelles did meet with the department, the council office, and advocates on all sides of the issue, trying to take their comments about the ordinance and make it better. Before he retired, Mr. Lascelles did draft an amendment to the ordinance, and that was transmitted yesterday. The amended ordinance attempts to incorporate and also balance the varying concerns of the different advocates on this issue, while also taking into account the needs of the department and also adhering to council's original request. Specifically, the original ordinance was amended in 4 ways. First of all, new qualifications appear in the definition of a conservation or educational presentation. Because council specifically asked for that exemption, even though some of the advocates, of course not all, but some wanted that exception eliminated, but we can't do that because of council's original request. But what we did do is put more restrictions on what type of entity qualifies as a conservation or educational wildlife center to be able to exhibit an animal under that exception. And it also makes clear that a group can't use that exemption if they're going to be serving alcohol or using amplified music at an event, to make sure that that exemption doesn't become a workaround. Another limitation was added, again, at the request of some of the advocates, to ensure that at these conservation presentations or educational presentations, that they don't use dangerous animals and allow them to interact in any way with the public. Also, at the request of the advocates, we added a new definition for circus, which is now banned in Los Angeles. And we've also amended the definition of dangerous animal. It's very difficult in ordinance drafting to use a definition that includes a list. So although there are some lists, for example, the definition has now been amended to capture all animals that pose an inherent risk of harm to health or safety because of the strength, size, physical characteristics, instincts, or risk of disease transmission by the animal. So again, in creating a list, it's hard to capture every animal, but this list of criteria should guide the department sufficiently in making sure that the animals are protected and the public is protected. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Well, I have questions I wasn't expecting based on some of the testimony. So, for example, we have a P22 day annually in Griffith Park. And we have amplified music. We also have a couple booths, including one where education on snakes is done. Kids are able to hold snakes, non-poisonous, non-dangerous, and it's viewed by many as a very positive thing. How would an event like that or other educational circumstances, how would that be handled? And they do have a little amplified music as entertainment, so it could even come under that exception. So how would an event like that be handled?
Well, first of all, the municipal code doesn't normally apply to city-sponsored events. So technically, the ordinance wouldn't apply. The city wouldn't have to go to its own animal services department to get a permit for an event that it puts on for educational purposes.
That's just an example. If someone else put it on, we'd be in the same circumstance.
Correct. But then if the city isn't putting it on, it hopefully would want those kinds of safeguards that we now have in the ordinance. There is an exemption for snakes in the definition of dangerous animal. It's now been enlarged from an exception for snakes up to 6 feet, and now it's up to 8 feet, which is sort of a standard definition of in other jurisdictions. So there still is an opportunity for legitimate conservation or educational programs to do what they do best, and that is bring animals into contact with people in a safe environment for educational purposes and to inspire learning and people getting involved in conservation activities. But it also gives the department the ability to, in approving a permit, to make sure the organization is legitimate, that it's got proper safeguards in place, and that the public will be safe when dealing with the animals on display at that event.
And they say that, and I have nothing to base it on one way or the other, that the 10 days would be overly restrictive for some of the conservation purposes.
Yeah, and that amount of time is the maximum. I think the department always endeavors to get those permits done more quickly, but it gives the department enough time, for example, when they're dealing with a new entity they've never dealt with before, to make sure that, again, the company is legitimate and understands what safeguards need to be in place. With regard to filming, those permits are handled through Film LA and the police department, and so permits for filming using animals, are always handled very quickly, even if they do involve animals. And I know the Department of Animal Services also tries to accommodate all filming requests. So it's more.
But they say that if you request 10 days, that could, in some cases, eliminate the opportunity.
Well, again,
so I know the council in general is very hesitant to impact the film industry negatively. So,
and again, if it was a studio that the department has a lot of experience with and knows their animal handlers and knows what company they're renting their animals from, and that they've got good reputations, that 10 days is likely to be very much sooner. But if it's a new film company, they don't know who the people are, they don't know where they got their animals, it might actually be in the public's best interest for them to have that full 10 days to investigate. So it's not you won't get it in 10 days. It's if the department needs up to 10 days, it can take up to 10 days. But
so if someone had 3 days notice, but it was a film studio and an animal handler that we work with regularly, we wouldn't require them to do the full 10 days,
right,
presumably.
It can be done on less than 10 days with the department consent.
Okay, other questions, colleagues?
Would it be possible just to have an approved list for organizations that we know do conservation efforts, filming efforts, so that when a new company comes by, they need to go through the, whatever permitting process, the 10 days, but for those companies that we know and we've verified to do this type of work, just to have them on the list so we can exempt them from
We can certainly pass that request along to the department. Again, the permit serves other functions, like ensures that insurance requirements are in place and updated regularly, ensures that the location is appropriate. It's not going to be in a location that's going to frighten the animal, which can cause additional dangers. So there are other benefits of requiring a permit, even if the department can issue the permits quickly. But we will pass along to the department that in order to ensure that permits are streamlined, that the department, if it already hasn't done so, work up a list of reputable and frequent educational and conservation groups, as well as film companies.
Is there a current permitting process for?
There is a current permitting process for the use of animals in filming and other activities
Sure.
in Los Angeles.
Filming, but what about
Yeah.
like for visiting a school to do a exhibition?
Again, this, not for, yet for dangerous and exotic animals, so this would be a new requirement. Again, it's to balance safety concerns for the public.
I mean, most of those are, I know the ones that we deal with in our district, they charge a very low fee for, coming out and educating our children. I mean, can't we, an approved list of people who are doing this for educational purposes to waive that
Yeah, again,
permit
we
fee?
will pass that along to the department.
Or perhaps have them, check it every 6 months rather than, every 2 weeks if they're going out and doing these
Yeah,
regularly.
well, again, there are annual permits available, so if you have a company that is their mission is to go out to schools and show them, non-threatening animals, they could get an annual permit. It would be a one-time thing every year. Again, then the department gets to check, oh yeah, they still have their insurance and all their other safeguards in place, but then they'd be free for a year. They don't have to get a new permit every time they go out and do a showing.
Great.
Mr. Price?
Yeah, we had, at least, thank you for the presentation and for all the work. I know we both have been working on this, council members. But we had at least one speaker who suggested that he wasn't covered under this program. I don't know if it was a rental service or what, but. Yeah, did you?
Yeah, provide animals to the motion picture industry.
So
Right.
is that a loophole or is that?
No, there's an exemption. Well, there is a special provision for filming, so that gentleman's company would fall under that exemption.
Under what name? There's no name here for me.
Right, but if your animals are going to be used in a filming, then the film company would be the entity taking out the permit.
Right, so what happens if it's a new student film? They come to us all the time, trying to learn to do school stuff, to learn how to be a director, photographer, or whatever. You're not going to know them because they're brand new, yet I've been in business with the city for 40 years. They know my record, I've never had a check on it or anything.
Right, again, maybe you could partner with the student filmers to apply for the permit.
Excuse me, no back and forth with the audience. We've
So
given you
anyway,
plenty of leeway.
There is a provision for people who rent animals for filming to continue in that business under this ordinance. They would just fall within the filming parameters.
So you need to follow.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, sorry for the disruption.
Okay, well, to attempt to address some of the outstanding questions, I'd like to add to the proposed actions instructions to Animal Services to either amend its existing permit regulations or add permit regulations to facilitate the proper implementation of this ordinance. And the department should work with stakeholders as necessary to develop these regulations and report back to PAW Committee with status updates on how the ordinance is working at a 6-month point of implementation and 1-year point. And with those added to the motion, I'd like to ask that we approve that item without objection. Hearing none, that item is approved. Item number 1.
Item number 1, communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Guy Lipa to the Board of Civil Service Commissioners for the term ending June 30th, 2024.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
If you'd like to say a little something about your background and why you want to do this and what you hope to accomplish with this appointment.
Of course. Thank you for having me. First of all, I'm appreciative of the mayor for bringing me forward in front of you and for you all hearing my nomination. As some of you know, both working with you when I was a staffer and you were council members or previous to that, I have dedicated the majority, the sort of first half of my career to city service here in Los Angeles. I was a chief counsel deputy to Eric Garcetti when he was council president, and then worked in his office as associate director of city services in his mayor's office, and in that capacity, I very much saw the importance of what civil service does for the citizens of Los Angeles, how civil service works, and in some cases doesn't work. And so when I was presented with the opportunity to now, as a private citizen, sort of continue my service to the city, especially in this important position as it relates to the future of city employment, also, how employees interact with sort of their the terms of their employment, things of that nature. It was right up my alley, both I think experience and also just in putting sort of our best foot forward as it relates to thinking of the future of how the city and city employees, how we attract the right employees for the future, how we ensure that employees are kind of doing the work the right way and with the right attitudes, et cetera. After serving the mayor in the mayor's office, I worked as chief of staff and executive assistant general manager at DWP for a couple of years, where I handled a lot of thinking through sort of the civil service and some of the challenges and some of the benefits as it relates to DWP and civil service, and also thinking through how to ensure that we are always setting ourselves to bring in the best and brightest for the future of the city, and that it still remains an extremely attractive place to recruit talent, and that we're operating properly and everything's moving smoothly. So that's kind of the gist of it.
Any other questions? Mr. Price.
Again, well, thank you for your willingness to serve, again, in a number of capacities. As you know, targeted local hire is something that this committee has been very concerned about, and other members of the council. Any thoughts on how we can make it even more robust, or how we can make the program more attractive for city departments to utilize as a tool for bringing in individuals who might not have a chance?
Absolutely. I think, one of the things that the city needs to think about is how we attract the best and brightest, and also how we ensure that people that live in the community are the people that work in the community. The people that work in the community also live in the community, because that's the best way that people are going to put the most into their jobs, when they feel like it's their job, but it's also their community. So, I think making sure that we're aligning compensation to allow people to live in their communities, which I think can be a challenge in Los Angeles. Recruiting tools as one of the things, at the department, and I think the city, some of the more technical departments in the city, like Bureau of Engineering and LADBS and things like that, have is how do we recruit local engineering talent? How do we ensure that we have diverse employees. So for me, I think it's really about ensuring that we are thinking about what today's college graduate needs, and how to get people, how to even get before that, how to ensure that we are getting to people maybe while they're in college, while they're in high school, thinking about it and creating those pathways, especially when it comes to, now as a city, we're competing with any number of, whether it's SpaceX or Tesla or, a startup or whatever, for a lot of these sort of technical talents. And so I think that is going to be one of the bigger challenges that we need to ensure that we're thinking about moving forward.
But so you do support the target local hire?
Absolutely. I think
program you think is important.
I think that the more people that live and work in the community that represent both sides of things, you're going to get the most out of people. And also, it's going to create a situation where you are. One of the things that we run into is that people are driving 2-3 hours. They're not, and it adds to a commute time, it adds to a day, it adds to stress, it adds to things of that nature. So I think what we can do and how we can tweak in the smartest way programs that allow people to be both part of the community and work on behalf of the community is very, very important.
Thank you.
I think I speak for all three of us when we say that the target local hiring is a very important program that we'd like to see continue. It's been a huge success here in the city. But colleagues, as someone who's personally worked with Mr. Lipa in every capacity that he served this city, I can't tell you that there's anybody more knowledgeable who has more experience about understanding how the city works. And I think this is actually a perfect fit because he's been dealing with issues that face the city, and on the Civil Service Commission, I think he would just be a great addition.
I think Mr. Lee said it perfectly. We're glad that you're willing to take on this role and are eminently qualified for it. So I'm going to ask that we approve the mayor's recommendation without objection, and I know my colleagues are happy to have you come aboard in this capacity.
Very much appreciated. Thank you, council members.
Thank you.
Look forward to serving the city.
Item number 2.
Item 2, CAO and city attorney reports and ordinances relative to amending Los Angeles Administrative Code pertaining to 12-step salary range structure for non-represented classifications, any class title change.
And we have a CAO representative to give us an overview of the ordinance and what exactly the changes are to the code that you're asking us to approve.
Hi, Carolyn Cooper. Good afternoon. I'm with the representing the City Administrative Officer. This is sort of a companion to the Omnibus non-rep report that our office released to City Council back in September. That was adopted, I believe, in either September or October. And we realized a little bit more detail was needed, we being the Controller's Office and the CAO's office. And so what this does is provide a little bit more detail on the conversion from 15-step salary ranges, which, if you remember, used to be 5-step salary ranges, went to 15. Now they're back to 12. And there was a little bit more detail, getting into the weeds a little bit more, that was needed for the Controller's Office, and just to explain to the reader and how people would understand how that conversion works. So that's one of the ordinance amendments, and another is just to reference that. And then the third ordinance was Personnel Department called to our attention a class title change from 19 years ago that apparently fell through the cracks and was never reflected in Schedule A of the Los Angeles Administrative Code. And for the uninitiated, Schedule A of Section 4.61 is the class listing of all the classifications employed by the city.
And does a department other than Rec and Parks use the superintendent of planning and construction classification?
I'm not aware of it. I don't know if personnel, Bill, are you aware of another department using that class?
I would have to look. I don't know. Thank you. I'd have to research it. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe you can get back to me on that question. Is the 12-step salary range structure for non-reps the same as represented classifications?
Yes, pretty much. There are still a couple represented units that are on the 15-step range or schematic. But yes, as far as the value of the steps and how much time you spend at each step, so steps 2 and 3 are 9 months each, and they have a value of what we refer to as one premium level, which is 2.75. Then after that, steps 4 through 12 are a year apart and 5.5%. Is there
4 through 8 are 5.5%, and then 9 through 12 are
right?
2.75%.
Yeah, because we don't like to keep things simple.
And those are exactly the same for both classes, rep and non-rep.
Yes, and the step 1 at this time is not being used except in those units that have the trainee classes. So at some point we may adjust the ranges so step 1 can be used again, but at this point we kept them all the same, where entry level would be starting on step 2.
Okay, great. Other questions?
I know this has been a long process.
Yes.
And it's something that non-reps have been eagerly awaiting. Do we know, we have a timeline? Is this, when we approve this, it goes to council, this will...
Yeah, it's
be
actually,
finished?
right, other than the class title change, the procedure's already in place. This just codifies it, the sort of the pieces that we're
Right.
missing to explain it better, but we've already been working closely with the controller's office and implementing this, which went into effect actually July 7, 2019, is when the conversion of the 15-step to the 12-step.
And the retroactive, that's going to happen.
Well, yes, basically on paper for the most part, because there was no COLA associated with that effective date. It was just a range number change.
I see.
There was a couple classes that may be a penny off, and so there might be a change for those classes.
Okay.
But yeah.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I'd ask that we approve the CAO's recommendations without objection. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Item number 3.
Item 3, CAO report relative to the Emergency Management Department Oversight Position Authority.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Stephanie from the Office of the CAO.
Good afternoon, council members. Aram Sahakian, General Manager, Emergency Management Department.
Do you want to give us a brief overview of this item?
Yes, sir. So during the fiscal year 1920 deliberations of our budget, we had asked for an assistant general manager position to head our community preparedness and emergency division. This includes the business sector. It includes our constituency in general. We have grown that division to 8 members right now. The demand for community preparedness has skyrocketed. In general, the demand for our business has skyrocketed because of the disasters that we've been having. So you approved with the position with the caveat, and you send it back to CAO's office to ensure that the AGM is the appropriate classification. In turn, CAO's office consulted with the personnel department, and they opined that, yes, AGM is the correct classification. So this position will oversee the planning division, which is in charge of ensuring all city agencies, departments, including council offices, and we're coming to you, they have their continuity of operations plan, they have their department emergency plan, and at the same time, developing additional planning procedures like the Ryland for the business sector, and at the same time will oversee the community preparedness division. We are in all 4 disaster management bureaus, and at the ground level, grassroots level, knocking on doors and preparing communities. We're at a point where we need more oversight. It is beyond our capabilities. We're a small department of 29 at this time. Rule of thumb is 1 emergency management coordinator for a population of 40,000. We're at 1 per 127,000. That's where we're at.
So it's not just the community events that create the need, but also the fact that we've had real emergencies.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for example, right now, Councilman Koretz, we're dealing with the coronavirus. We're full on dealing with that situation with LAWA, with County Public Health. If we have another emergency at this time, I don't have another AGM that can deal with that situation.
And the community events, how are those increased, and what types of community events are we talking about?
Ryland events, which is basically finding communities. And by the way, we're working with all the Department of, with DUN and the neighborhood councils, or 99 neighborhood councils, to recruit volunteers. That's another program that will ultimately fall in under this position. Initially, we were going to use the mayor's volunteer task force, but we were recommended that we create our own volunteer task force. So we will recruit additional people. Our target is to have 100 volunteers to go out to the communities and knock on doors and put the Ryland program together, which is the Radio LA Neighborhood program, and the business sector also. We haven't even scratched the surface preparing our businesses.
Thank you. Other questions, comments, colleagues? If not, I would say that, as you know, in conversations we have, I always have considered this department understaffed in general, and I think this position is pretty desperately needed, so we will enthusiastically recommend support for the CAO's recommendations without objection.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, and continue your good work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Item number 9.
Item 9, Department of Animal Services report relative to the acceptance of donation from the Arden versus City of Los Angeles Qualified Settlement Fund in the sum of $113,780. That's a technical correction from the original caption.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. Catherine Chico with the Department of Animal Services. The department is requesting authorization to accept this donation from the Arden Qualified Settlement Fund. The class members were provided an opportunity to select, if they chose to donate their refund to 4 different programs within the city of LA, and the Animal Welfare Trust Fund was one of those funds, and it generated a donation in the amount of $113,780.
So Animal Services gets this because the class requested that.
Yes, as part of the settlement agreement, the class members could either receive the refund directly or choose one of 4 city programs to donate. And so some of the class members decided to donate their refunds to the Animal Welfare Trust Fund.
Great. And anything specifically earmarked within the trust fund?
It was unrestricted. So there was no designation of what they wanted, specifically the funds to be used for.
Great. Any other questions, comments? If not, I'll ask that we approve the Department of Animal Services recommendations without objection.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 10.
Item number 10, Department of Animal Services report relative to proposed amendment number 5, contract number C-123811 with the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals to provide spay, neuter, and related veterinary services at the South Los Angeles Animal Services Center.
Catherine Chico with the Department of Animal Services. The department is requesting an extension to the ASPCA's current contract, which is set to expire on April 13, 2020. And right now we are we're initiating the RFQ process, and the contract won't be in place. And having the ASPCA at our facility is really critical for
for providing spay-neuter surgeries for both our adopted animals and then also for animals associated with the public when they come in with their spay and neuter vouchers and discount coupons and things like that. So this request would allow us to continue the contract for approximately 8 months, which will give us enough time to go through the RFQ process and an established contract.
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense based on the timing, but how did we let this sort of sneak up on us so that we had to renew it rather than get the RFQ request or whatever out in time?
In prior years, we were issuing separate RFQs for the mobile vans and for our on-site clinics, and we are now consolidating that into one process so that we could establish on-call contracts, which will streamline the whole entire process. And it'll just make it easier to manage all of our contracts using the same contract language, across the board. So we're trying to establish an easier way for not only the staff to manage the contracts, but also to bring in additional vendors that are interested in contracting with the city.
And ASPCA, are they just in this one shelter, or are they in other shelters in our system?
They're at this one shelter, but going forward with the RFQ process, we could have a vendor that's interested in, in the future, being at multiple facilities. And we will be going through the RFQ process and the contracting process.
And that would be true for the ASPCA
Yes, for all of our different vendors, or even new vendors coming in, which we hope we do receive additional vendors in the future.
Okay. Any other questions, colleagues? If not, I'd ask that we approve the Department of Animal Services recommendations without objection. And do we have anything else before us?
There's the desk.
We are done with our business, so we are adjourned.